In the quiet village of Bethany, an urgent message was sent. Lazarus, a man Jesus dearly loved, was gravely ill. But when Jesus heard the news, he did something unexpected. He waited. When Jesus received the message,
"Lord, the one you love is sick,"
his response was unexpected. He didn't rush to Bethany. He didn't gather his disciples to leave immediately. Instead, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. To those around him, this must have seemed strange, even unsettling. Lazarus wasn't just another follower. He was a dear friend. Mary and Martha weren't strangers, they were like family. Their message wasn't casual, it was desperate. Yet Jesus waited. But his delay wasn't neglect. It was intentional. He turned to his disciples and said,
"This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it."
To them, his words were a mystery. How could a sickness that threatened Lazarus' life serve a greater purpose? Why wouldn't he go to his friend's side when he had healed strangers with just a word? As the days passed, Lazarus' condition worsened. In Bethany, hope was slipping away. Mary and Martha must have watched the door, expecting any moment to see Jesus appear. But he didn't come. And then Lazarus died. By the time Jesus finally said,
"Let us go back to Judea,"
his disciples were hesitant. Bethany was near Jerusalem, where people had recently tried to stone him. They questioned his decision, afraid for his safety. But Jesus answered with words that carried a deeper meaning.
"Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up."
The disciples didn't understand. They thought he spoke of natural sleep, wondering why they'd risk their lives for someone who would recover on his own. So Jesus spoke plainly.
"Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him."
His delay wasn't a lack of love. It was a lesson in faith, a setup for something greater than healing. It was the beginning of a miracle that would change everything. By the time Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. The weight of grief hung thick in the air. Friends and neighbors had gathered to mourn, their voices hushed with sorrow. But when Martha heard that Jesus was near, she didn't wait. She rushed out to meet him, her heart a storm of grief and hope tangled together.
"Lord,"
she said, her voice trembling,
"if you had been here, my brother would not have died."
It wasn't an accusation, it was the raw, honest cry of a sister mourning the loss of her brother. Yet even in her grief, there was a flicker of faith.
"But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask."
Jesus looked at her and said,
"Your brother will rise again."
Martha nodded, thinking he meant the distant promise of the resurrection at the end of days. But then Jesus spoke words that echoed beyond that moment, words that still resonate across time.
"I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die."
Martha's face steadied.
"Yes, Lord,"
she replied.
"I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God."
Then she hurried back to call her sister Mary. When Mary came to Jesus, she fell at his feet, her tears soaking the dust. She said the same words as Martha, but with the weight of heartbreak.
"Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died."
Jesus was deeply moved. The grief of his friends pierced him. And in that sacred moment, surrounded by sorrow, the shortest, most powerful verse was written. Jesus wept. He didn't weep because he was powerless. He didn't weep because all hope was lost. He wept because he felt the weight of humanity's grief, the sting of death's shadow over his friends, the tears of God falling on the dust of a broken world. Jesus stood before the tomb, a cave with a large stone rolled across the entrance. The crowd watched, silent and expectant, their grief mingled with confusion. Then Jesus gave a command that must have sent a ripple through the crowd.
"Take away the stone."
Martha, ever practical, hesitated.
"Lord, by this time there will be a bad odor, for he has been dead 4 days."
It was a moment of raw humanity, grief tangled with the finality of death. But Jesus turned to her, his voice steady and filled with quiet authority.
Did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God?
The stone was rolled away. Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven and prayed, not for his own sake, but for those standing there, that they might believe. Then, with a voice that carried both power and tenderness, he called out,
Lazarus, come out.
Silence hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then movement from within the tomb. Lazarus emerged, still wrapped in burial cloths, his face covered. Gasps echoed through the crowd, shock, awe, disbelief turning into undeniable reality. Death had released its grip, not because of ritual or tradition, but because Jesus had spoken.
Unbind him and let him go.
Jesus said, as the crowd stared in stunned silence, witnessing a miracle that would be spoken of for generations. Hands that had once prepared Lazarus for burial now rushed to unwrap him. Each layer of cloth revealed what seemed impossible: warm skin, steady breath, life where there had been none. The grief that had gripped Bethany only moments before was replaced by awe, joy, and trembling disbelief. News of the miracle spread quickly, from whispered conversations in homes to loud proclamations in the streets. Many who witnessed it believed in Jesus, their faith sealed by what they had seen with their own eyes. But not everyone responded with belief. Some, filled with fear and jealousy, ran to the religious leaders, reporting all that had happened. This moment, this undeniable miracle, set events in motion that would lead to the greatest sacrifice of all. For while Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead, his own path was leading him toward the cross, where he would face death, not to escape it, but to conquer it for all. The story of Lazarus is more than just an account of a man brought back to life. It's a revelation of who Jesus is, the resurrection and the life. He didn't just perform a miracle. He made a declaration that echoes through time, that death does not have the final word. When Jesus delayed, it wasn't out of indifference. It was to reveal something greater, that even in our waiting, even in our deepest grief, God's timing holds purpose. Martha and Mary wanted healing, but Jesus offered resurrection. They wanted their brother to recover, but Jesus showed them that he holds authority over life and death itself. And when Jesus wept, he showed us that God is not distant from our pain. He enters into it, feels it with us, and stands beside us in our darkest moments. His tears remind us that it's okay to grieve, but his words remind us to hope. So what does this mean for us today? It means that no situation is beyond his reach. No heart is too broken, no life too far gone. Whether you're waiting for an answer, standing in the midst of loss, or wondering if hope is even possible, remember this: the same voice that called Lazarus from the grave still speaks today. The story of Lazarus challenges us to look beyond what we see and trust in the one who sees the bigger picture. It's a reminder that even when all seems lost, God is still at work, sometimes in ways we can't understand until the stone is rolled away. What about you? Where in your life do you need to hear the words, "Come out"? Where do you need to believe that even in the waiting, God's timing is perfect? If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments. What stood out to you the most? And if you'd like to dive deeper into more powerful stories like this, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join us as we explore the mysteries and miracles woven throughout the Bible. Until next time, remember, even in the silence, even in the waiting, hope is never buried.